Hash the weight of empty arms. The doctor's words still echoed in Martha Brennan's ears 3 years later, even as she stood in the general store measuring out flour for Mrs. Henderson's order. You'll never carry a child, Mrs. Brennan. I'm sorry. She'd been 22 then, newly married to Thomas, full of dreams about filling their little homestead with laughter. Now she was 25, a widow, and those dreams had turned to dust like everything else in Redemption Flats. The bell above the door jangled, and Martha looked up from the flour barrel to see Samuel Pierce standing in the doorway, hat in his hands, looking like a man who'd forgotten how to ask for help. His 4 children huddled behind him, the oldest girl maybe 10, the youngest boy barely 3. Their clothes were clean enough, but wrinkled in ways that told Martha no woman's hands had touched an iron in their household for months. "Mr. Pierce," she said, wiping flour dust from her apron, "what can I do for you?" Samuel cleared his throat, his weathered face reddening. "Miss Martha, that is, we—" He glanced back at his children, and Martha saw something crack in his expression. "I need to buy some fabric for dresses, and I don't know the first damn thing about it." The oldest girl, Catherine, Martha remembered, put her hand on her father's arm. "Papa, you don't have to curse in front of Miss Martha." "Right, sorry." Samuel looked at Martha with eyes that held an exhaustion deeper than any physical labor could produce. "My wife's been gone 8 months now. Catherine's been doing her best, but she's growing out of everything, and so's Emma, and the boys need new shirts because they keep tearing theirs to pieces, and I—" He stopped, jaw working like he was chewing on words too bitter to swallow. Martha came around the counter, her heart doing something strange in her chest. She'd seen Samuel Pierce around town since his wife Eleanor died of fever last winter, always moving like a man underwater, always surrounded by his 4 children like ducklings following their lost father. She'd kept her distance, the way she kept her distance from most families. It hurt less that way. "I can help with that," she heard herself say. "Why don't you let me measure the children, and we'll figure out what they need." The relief that washed over Samuel's face was almost painful to witness. For the next hour, Martha measured and calculated, pulling bolts of sturdy cotton from the shelves while the children stood statue still, unused to a woman's attention. Catherine was all sharp angles and serious eyes, trying too hard to be the mother she wasn't ready to be. Emma, maybe 7, had a gap-toothed smile that appeared cautiously when Martha complimented her dark braids. The boys, James and little Thomas, fidgeted and whispered until Catherine shushed them with a look that belonged on someone 3 times her age. "Miss Martha," Catherine said quietly while her father was examining suspenders for the boys, "do you know how to make a dress that don't look so plain?" Martha paused, thread basket in hand. The longing in the girl's voice cut straight through her carefully constructed walls. "What did you have in mind?" "Mama used to put little bits of ribbon at the collar, nothing fancy, just pretty." Catherine's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Papa tries so hard, but he don't notice things like that." Martha found herself nodding before she could think better of it. "I'll add some ribbon, and maybe some nice buttons for the front. Would you like that?" The smile that broke across Catherine's face was like sunrise after a long night. Samuel appeared at her elbow, smelling of leather and wood smoke. "How much do I owe you, Miss Martha?" She tallied the numbers in her head, then subtracted what she knew he couldn't afford. Thomas had left her the store and enough savings to get by. She didn't need much, $12 for everything. "That seems low." "That's the price." She met his eyes, saw him calculating, saw the pride warring with necessity. "And I can sew the dresses and shirts up for you. No extra charge, I've got the time." "Miss Martha, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm offering." She softened her voice, aware of the children watching. "I like keeping busy, Mr. Pierce. Gives me something to do besides count inventory." Something shifted in his expression, a recognition perhaps that they both knew what it meant to need occupation against grief. "Then I'm grateful, truly." The children left with promises of new clothes in 2 weeks, and Martha stood in the empty store afterward, wondering what she'd just done. She pressed her hand against her flat stomach, an old habit, and felt the familiar hollow ache. Other women in town had stopped asking when she'd have children of her own. They knew, everyone knew. She closed up early and went home to her small house behind the store, where silence waited like an uninvited guest. 3 days later, Martha was halfway through Emma's dress when Samuel Pierce showed up at her door with a crate of vegetables. "From my garden," he said, setting it on her porch. "Figured it was only right, since you're doing all this sewing for us." Martha wiped her hands on her apron, studying the man in her doorway. Up close, she could see the gray threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of too many nights with too little sleep. He was maybe 35, broad-shouldered from farm work, with hands that looked like they'd forgotten gentleness. "That's kind of you, but not necessary." "It is to me." He shifted his weight, glanced past her into the house where fabric lay scattered across her kitchen table. "Listen, Miss Martha, I know people talk. About you helping us, I mean. Widow Henderson already made some comment at church about propriety and—" "I don't care what Mrs. Henderson thinks." The words came out sharper than Martha intended. She'd endured enough of Widow Henderson's opinions about childless women and their place in society. "Your children need clothes. I can make them. That's the end of it." Samuel's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You always this stubborn?" "Only when I'm right." This time he did smile, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger, less like a man drowning. "Fair enough. Well, thank you, again." He started to turn, then stopped. "Miss Martha, would you— that is, the children were wondering if maybe you'd like to come to supper sometime. Catherine's been practicing her biscuits, and she wants to show someone besides me and her brothers." Martha's first instinct was to decline. Suppers meant families, meant seeing what she'd never have, meant feeling the empty space beside her grow wider. But she thought of Catherine's hopeful face, of Emma's gap-toothed smile, of those two little boys who probably needed a gentle voice at their table. "Sunday," she heard herself say. "If that suits you. Sunday would be perfect." After he left, Martha sat at her table and stared at the half-finished dress. Her hands were shaking. She hadn't sat at a family table since Thomas died, hadn't let herself get close to children who might make her heart remember what it wanted. But something about Samuel Pierce's exhausted eyes and Catherine's too-old expression had slipped past her defenses. She picked up her needle and kept sewing. Sunday supper at the Pierce homestead was chaos barely contained. Little Thomas spilled his milk twice. James argued with Emma about who got to sit next to Martha. Catherine burned the biscuits and looked ready to cry until Martha quietly praised the stew and asked for the recipe. Samuel sat at the head of the table, looking overwhelmed and grateful in equal measure. "Papa cries at night sometimes," Emma announced suddenly, in the way children do when they haven't learned what shouldn't be said aloud. The table went silent. Catherine turned red. Samuel closed his eyes. "Emma," he said quietly. "Well, you do. I hear you through the wall." Martha reached for the butter, keeping her voice steady. "My husband died 2 years ago, Emma. I cried at night for months. Sometimes I still do. There's no shame in missing someone you love." Emma considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Mama used to sing to us at bedtime. Papa don't know the words to her songs." "Doesn't know," Catherine corrected automatically. "Maybe Miss Martha knows them," James suggested hopefully. 4 pairs of eyes turned to Martha, 5 if she counted Samuel's cautious glance. She felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept carefully sealed. "I might know a few songs. Would you like me to sing one after supper?" The children's faces lit up like lanterns. Later, with the dishes cleared and the children in their nightshirts, Martha sat on the edge of Catherine's bed and sang Red River Valley, while 4 children listened like she was giving them something precious. Samuel stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, and when Martha glanced up, she saw him swipe at his eyes. When the song ended, little Thomas was already asleep. Emma yawned. James asked if Martha would come back next Sunday. "If your father doesn't mind," Martha said. "We don't mind," Catherine whispered. "We don't mind at all." Outside, walking Martha to her wagon under a sky full of stars, Samuel stopped and turned to face her. "Thank you for tonight, for the singing, for not making them feel like their grief is something to hide. Grief should never be hidden. Martha pulled her shawl tighter against the cooling air. It needs to be carried, but it doesn't need to be carried alone. Is that how you manage with Thomas? She hesitated, then decided on honesty. Some days I manage, some days I don't, but I keep moving forward because stopping feels worse. Samuel nodded slowly. Eleanor used to say something similar. She'd say grief is just love with nowhere to go. She sounds like she was wise. She was, and I miss her so much some days I can barely breathe. He looked down at his boots, then back up at Martha. But tonight, with you singing and the children smiling, I felt like maybe we might be okay, eventually. Martha's throat tightened. You will be. They're good children, Samuel. You're doing better than you think. I'm just trying not to drown. Then keep treading water. That's all any of us can do. He helped her into the wagon, his hand steady under her elbow. As she drove away, Martha looked back once and saw him still standing there, a silhouette against the lamplight from his house, watching her go. She pressed her hand to her stomach again, that old habit, and for the first time in 3 years, the ache felt different. Not less, exactly, but somehow more bearable. The next 3 weeks passed in a rhythm Martha hadn't expected. She'd finish sewing or minding the store, then find herself at the Pierce homestead, teaching Catherine how to properly iron shirts, showing Emma how to braid her own hair, reading stories to the boys before bed. Samuel would watch from wherever he was working, mending fence, feeding stock, fixing the sagging porch steps, and sometimes their eyes would meet across the yard, and something unspoken would pass between them. The town noticed. Of course they noticed. Widow Henderson cornered Martha outside the church one Sunday morning, her face pinched with concern that didn't reach her eyes. Martha, dear, people are starting to talk about you and Samuel Pierce, about how much time you're spending out there. Let them talk. Martha adjusted her hat, ready to walk away. It's not proper, a widow woman spending so much time with a widower, unchaperoned. What will people think? They'll think I'm helping a man care for his children, which is exactly what I'm doing. But dear, you need to think of your reputation. And really, is it wise, getting attached to children who aren't yours, who can never be yours? The words hit like a physical blow. Martha felt her face go hot, then cold. Excuse me. Mrs. Henderson's expression was almost pitying. Everyone knows about your condition, dear, about what the doctor said. It's tragic, truly, but pretending to be a mother to those children won't change what you can't have. Martha's hands clenched at her sides. Those children need help. I'm providing it. My ability or inability to bear children has nothing to do with whether I can care about them. I'm just trying to save you from heartbreak, dear. When Samuel eventually finds a proper wife, someone who can give him more children, where will that leave you? That's enough. Samuel's voice came from behind them, quiet but firm. He'd apparently heard the entire exchange. Mrs. Henderson, I'd appreciate it if you didn't discuss my family or Miss Martha in that tone. The older woman huffed. Mr. Pierce, I was simply... No, he stepped beside Martha, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Miss Martha has been kinder to my children than anyone else in this town. She's asked for nothing and given everything. Whatever she chooses to do with her time is her business, not yours. Mrs. Henderson's face went red. Well, I never. Maybe you should start, Samuel said evenly. Good day, ma'am. As the woman bustled away, Martha found she couldn't quite catch her breath. Samuel turned to her, concern creasing his forehead. Are you all right? I'm fine. You're shaking. She was. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces together. She's right, you know, about me getting attached, about it being foolish. Martha! I can't have children, Samuel. The doctor was very clear. Something's wrong inside me, something broken that can't be fixed. The words tumbled out, 3 years of hurt compressed into seconds, and I've been trying so hard not to want what I can't have. But your children, they make me forget sometimes. They make me feel like maybe I could be enough, just as I am. Samuel's hand found hers, warm and solid. You are enough, more than enough. But she's right about the rest too. Eventually, you'll need a real wife, someone who can give you more children, someone who... Stop, he squeezed her hand gently. Just stop. I don't want more children, Martha. I can barely manage the 4 I have. And if I ever did want a wife again, it wouldn't be because she could give me Barbies. It would be because she made my children laugh, because she taught Catherine that it's okay to want pretty things, because she reads to my boys with patience I don't have, because when I look at her, I don't feel like I'm drowning anymore. Martha's eyes strung. Samuel, I'm not asking you for anything. I know it's too soon for both of us, but I need you to know what you've given us, what you've been to us. It's not less because you can't bear children. It's more, it's everything. A tear slipped down her cheek. Samuel wiped it away with his thumb, the gesture so tender it nearly broke her. Come to supper tonight, he said softly. Please, the children miss you when you're not there. I miss you when you're not there. She nodded, not trusting her voice. They stood there on the church lawn, hands linked, while the congregation filtered past with curious looks and whispered comments. Martha didn't care anymore. Let them talk. Let them speculate. For the first time since Thomas died, since the doctor spoke those devastating words, she felt like maybe her empty arms weren't a curse. Maybe they were just waiting to hold something different than she'd planned. 2 months later, on a crisp October evening, Samuel Pierce knocked on Martha's door with flour in his hair and panic in his eyes. Catherine's sick, he said without preamble. High fever, won't stop coughing. Emma's starting to feel warm too. I don't know what to do. Martha didn't hesitate. She grabbed her medical kit, the one Thomas had assembled for her, back when they dreamed of a house full of children who might need tending, and followed Samuel into the night. For 3 days, Martha barely left the Pierce homestead. She sat up with Catherine and Emma through feverish nights, bathing their foreheads with cool cloths, spooning broth between cracked lips, singing soft songs when the coughing fits subsided. Samuel hovered helplessly, caring for the boys while trying to keep them away from their sisters. The doctor came and went, pronouncing it a bad fever, but nothing more serious, nothing like the one that had taken Eleanor. On the 3rd night, Catherine's fever finally broke. She opened her eyes and whispered, Mama. Martha's heart clenched. No, sweetheart, it's Miss Martha. Catherine blinked, focusing. Oh, I thought, I was dreaming, I think. You were very sick, but you're getting better now. The girl's hand found Martha's. Miss Martha, will you stay, even when we're all better? Will you keep coming to supper? If you want me to. I do, we all do. Even Papa, though he's too scared to say it proper. Martha smiled despite her exhaustion. He's not scared, he's just careful, that's different. He looks at you the way he used to look at Mama before she got sick. The words hung in the air between them. Martha didn't know how to respond, so she just held Catherine's hand and hummed until the girl drifted back to sleep. In the kitchen, Samuel was slumped at the table, his head in his hands. Martha poured them both coffee and sat down across from him. She's better, Martha said. The fever broke. Samuel looked up, relief washing over his face. Thank God, thank you. I don't know what I would have done if. You would have managed. You're stronger than you think. I'm not strong at all. He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup like it might anchor him. Eleanor got sick so fast. One day she was fine, the next she was burning up, and then she was gone. When Catherine started coughing, I couldn't breathe. All I could think was that I was going to lose her too. But you didn't. She's going to be fine. Because of you, because you stayed, because you knew what to do. He met her eyes across the table. I can't keep pretending this is just neighborly help, Martha. I can't keep acting like having you here doesn't mean everything to me and my children. Martha's pulse quickened. Samuel. I know it's too soon. I know people would talk. Hell, they're already talking. But I need you to know, these past few months, you've given us more than clean clothes and home-cooked meals. You've given us hope. You've made this house feel less empty. You've made me remember what it's like to look forward to something. I can't give you more children. The words came out flat, stating the fact that always hovered between them, spoken or not. I don't want more children. I want you, just you, exactly as you are. He reached across the table and took her hand. I love my children more than breath, Martha, but they're not missing a mother who can give birth. They're missing a woman who makes them feel safe, who teaches them and laughs with them and doesn't try to replace Eleanor but just shows up every day the way you have been. Tears spilled down Martha's cheeks. I'm terrified. Of what? Of wanting this too much, of letting myself believe I can have this, of waking up one day and realizing it was all temporary, that I'm not really theirs, that I'm just borrowed. Samuel stood and came around the table, pulling her into his arms. She pressed her face against his chest and let herself cry, for Thomas, for the children she'd never carry, for the years of feeling broken, for the terrifying hope blooming in her chest. You're not borrowed, Samuel whispered into her hair. You're ours, if you want to be, not because we need someone to cook and clean and sew, but because when you're here, we're complete, all 5 of us, we're a family. Martha pulled back enough to look at him. I've been so afraid of not being enough. And I've been afraid of asking for too much, but maybe we're both wrong, maybe we're exactly what each other needs. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, and Martha felt something inside her finally settle. This wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't the one she'd dreamed of when she married Thomas. But it was real, and it was here, and it was asking her to be brave enough to accept it. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, I want to be yours. They married in the spring, on a Sunday morning with wildflowers blooming across the prairie. Catherine wore her new dress with ribbon at the collar, Emma scattered flower petals down the aisle, and the boys stood solemn and proud in their pressed shirts. Widow Henderson sat in the back row with a pinched expression, but Martha didn't care. She only had eyes for Samuel and the 4 children, who would become hers in every way that mattered. After the ceremony, little Thomas tugged on Martha's dress and asked in a voice that carried across the church lawn, "Are you our mama now?" Martha knelt down to his level, aware that everyone was watching, waiting to see what she'd say. She thought about Eleanor, about the woman who'd brought these children into the world and loved them first. She thought about her own empty womb, about the children she'd never carry. And she thought about Catherine's biscuits and Emma's braids and James's bedtime stories and this small boy looking at her with such hope. I'm your Martha, she said clearly, and I love you more than words can say. Is that enough? Thomas considered this with the seriousness of a 3-year-old weighing profound truths. Then he threw his arms around her neck and said, "That's perfect." That night, in the house that was now theirs together, Martha stood on the porch, watching the sun set over Redemption Flats. Samuel came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Martha thought about the doctor's words, about the years of feeling broken, about the life she'd thought she'd lost. Then she thought about the sounds of children laughing inside their house, about Catherine teaching Emma how to sew, about the boys begging Samuel to tell them just one more story. Not a single one, she said, and meant it with everything in her. Because some families were born from blood and biology, and some were built from grief and grace and the courage to love what life offered instead of mourning what it didn't. Martha's arms would never carry a child, but they were full nonetheless, full of purpose, full of love, full of these 4 souls who'd chosen her just as much as she'd chosen them. The weight of empty arms, she'd learned, could be transformed into the strength of open ones. And that was more than enough. It was everything.